Lightyear is an above-average sci-fi fantasy film that ostensibly acts as a beloved toy's origin story. I was actually hoping to entirely ignore the origin story aspect, but the film opens with white text on a black background in incredibly grim fashion to inform you that this is, in fact, supposed to be a fictional film from the Toy Story universe, released in the 1980s or 1990s. And it's nothing like one. The writing, the character archetypes, the graphical fidelity, and the tone of the film are completely incompatible with popular art from the 80s and 90s. This film barely got made this way today. It certainly wouldn't have flown back then. The humor is too self-referential, the technology isn't speculative in a believable way for the time period, and it just doesn't work. If you wanted to make a fictional film that took place in the 80s or 90s, it'd be hand-drawn 2D animation, have a much more distinct style, and a very different dialogue. Does Lightyear work as its own standalone story? Yes, absolutely. But that's not the framing the story was given, and that framing was deliberately chosen as obvious nostalgia bait. It's bad, and Disney should be ashamed for trying to advertise Lightyear as part of the Toy Story universe. Stuff like this actively harms people's understanding of the way our culture changes over time. That aside, the film itself is good. It's character-heavy, and thankfully the characters are compelling to watch. Buzz himself has an obvious, easy-to-follow internal and external conflict. He demonstrates relatable flaws, and he has a pleasingly realistic slow-burn character arc. Buzz tied all of his self-value to external means of arbitrary success, to his job, to a title, to a mission he's decided was important at the cost of everything. He was so focused on that arbitrary, external success that he lost track of any and all internal peace. Maybe he never even had the peace to begin with, since it was entirely predicated on factors outside his own mind. And by extension, outside his own intrinsic value as a human being. Life literally passes him by, just as it does metaphorically, until he's lost all sight of what it means to be human. The Buzz who's lost sight of humanity eventually becomes Zurg, while the Buzz who's our protagonist comes to understand that what matters is the value we find where we are, inside ourselves and the people around us, not the value we project onto ideological concepts. All of the developments and dialogue between the protagonists feel natural, and the film's morality even touches on some genuinely heavy concepts regarding time travel. I certainly wasn't expecting that from Lightyear, but I am pleased with it. As someone who's a huge fan of the hero's journey, making the antagonist the same character as the protagonist is the absolute height of euphoria for me. I do think it's a pretty good film overall, and it quelled my fears that Pixar just makes bad movies now. I'm glad that Pixar is, in fact, still capable of making things that are thoughtful.